Every Saturday tells a story, from the games and moments that shape a season to the rivalries, traditions, and people that make college football special. Welcome to Saturday Huddle, where we explore the stories behind the game. So, I'm here today with Edward Egros, who is a data scientist, a broadcaster, the writer a writer at Pine Sports, as well as one of the co-hosts of a new podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we get into our show?
Absolutely. And first off, it's great to join you here on this platform. I'm really excited about the conversation we are to have, and also excited about the baseball podcast that Will Carroll and I recently started called Injury Territory, where we talk about baseball injuries and baseball analytics and how sort of the two different fields merge when it comes to helping us better understand the injuries that we see on the baseball diamond, recovery, new technology, all kinds of good stuff. I really feel like that in terms of understanding baseball at a high level, the conversations that Will and I are able to put together have absolutely met, if not exceeded, expectations. And so that's been a wonderful project.
That sounds like an amazing project. And obviously, a lot of sports fans turn to baseball in the off season of football season for that entertainment. Perhaps baseball is their first love, but it is nice that we have baseball season, such a long season, that we have multiple months of, games to watch, narratives to be crafted, stories to follow, and all of that. So I think that's really great. Super awesome that you guys are doing that. Is it like just professional, or is it college as well? Or what's the span?
It's basically Major League Baseball, but I'm sure I'll sneak in just a little bit of college baseball conversation. If for no other reason, here in Los Angeles, UCLA is the number one baseball team going right now. And it is this weird thing where suddenly the Big Ten Conference is starting to creep up just a little bit. And I knew you would appreciate this, Emily. So, I promise this is unsolicited. But
Right.
it's something where the SEC has absolutely dominated college baseball for such a long time. But with all of the resources the Big Ten starting to put together, it has been very interesting to see if sort of that baton passing is happening on the baseball side as well. It may not be this year, but it may be very soon. And so certainly with that comes a lot of injuries and conversation about the college game as a whole. If we are protecting our athletes, for making sure they're staying safe and all that good stuff. So I know that's going to be a topic of conversation fairly soon, but definitely Major League Baseball, and to an extent minor league baseball, sort of dominates our conversation just because it's something where when we watch the sport, I don't know if we necessarily appreciate all of the things that go into making sure that players can play potentially a full 162 game slate. And if there are things that players and managers and such can do to make sure that longevity can be maintained. And I think those conversations are really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we were just talking about what a long season it is. Injury, I imagine, is like such a big component of that because it is such a lengthy season. And do you have a favorite professional baseball team, like an MLB team?
Sure. So I grew up a Texas Rangers fan, just because of my time at SMU and all of my connections to Dallas and Texas in general. But also, when the Angels do well, that's fantastic for me, since I have done a lot with the ball club there. And I also try and go to as many games as possible across the country. I haven't hit all 30 major league ballparks yet, but definitely it's something where there might be a favorite player who I'm checking out, or a dynamic that's really interesting. Like, for example, when last year the Detroit Tigers were sort of revolutionizing base running, then suddenly I really cared about Detroit baseball more than I ever had in my life. And so sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a strategy, sometimes it's nostalgia with the Rangers. It just depends on the time of day, I guess.
Yeah, and that's such a nice approach to sports in general, I think. Is like when you're able to have that type of approach where whatever a certain player or a certain storyline, something that's making history, that you're able to follow that and really appreciate it and enjoy it without being as emotionally invested as we see some fans are with their teams. I think that's like it's like refreshing. because that's kind of what it is with some sports. It's like, oh, this is refreshing. I can enjoy this because I'm not so emotionally attached to a particular outcome.
It's interesting that I think if you've worked in sports long enough, that suddenly you devise an opinion on ownership.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can impact where your loyalties are. Because if you're dealing with an owner who is, and especially if we're talking baseball here, if you're dealing with an owner who's really, really cheap and doesn't improve the ballpark and isn't really trying to win games as much as, say, an owner down the street, for example, then you can understand why those loyalties, get compromised a little bit. And while we want to believe in eternal love for our teams, at the same time, are we getting that back in some way? Are we at least seeing the effort that we want to see? It's interesting. Like last night, as we're recording this, last night I was watching Game 7 between the Pistons and the Cavaliers, and it felt like, yes, it was a blowout game, but there were a lot of empty seats like after halftime and early fourth quarter. And I couldn't help but feel sad about that because the Pistons had not gotten that far in the playoffs in quite some time. Cade Cunningham, superstar, also very young, and it's going to take some time to develop things. And I figured, I get it's a school night per se, but why not be there to the end? Like they are trying their best. It's not like the team just gave up. They just ran into a buzzsaw on one night. And I do wish that when it comes to what fans do, that yes, analyze your owners, understand who they are, like them, dislike them, whatever, but then also understand who's actually trying their best out there and be loyal to them, just as you are to a city, a culture, anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so relevant and important with professional sports in general. We see a lot of narratives and storylines along those lines of the owners and all kind of like the behind the scenes components of it, which is not what we see in the same exact way with college sports, particularly college football. So we're here today to talk about why college football is a storytelling machine. And as you know, you follow the sport in general. As you know, it doesn't necessarily just end in January after the national championship is played. It's something we are continuously talking about and analyzing all the way up into spring football, through that, and obviously until we have actual games again and the season kicks off in August. So it's actually a fascinating element of the sports in general. Like, so for people who don't follow sports, who are not sports fans, it's probably a really fascinating, maybe odd thing that we like talk about it. And there's so many storylines and narratives around our particular team or a particular sport, either at the college level, the minor level, or the professional level as well. So why do you think, and I would love to kind of hear your opinion on this, especially segueing from what you were just talking about with baseball, like why do you think fans care so deeply about college football?
I think it's a couple of things. Number one, it's just location, 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 right? Because a lot of these vaunted football venues are in places that don't have to compete against anything else for the sports bandwidth or the bandwidth of most anything. As someone who grew up just outside of Baton Rouge, at least for me personally, there wasn't a whole lot to do in the spring and the summer months. It was really hot and it was humid and miserable. And even as a kid, going outside wasn't fun. I mean, it wasn't until I moved to Texas and other places where the weather was a little bit better in the summer where I actually felt comfortable going outside and playing and such. So, not to say I had a bad childhood in that regard, but still, though, it's something where a lot of these places don't have to compete against anything else. And so your culture, your sense of self, your sense of community all revolves around college football because you don't have a whole lot else to go to. These places are in suburbia and rural America, as it should be, because I think one of the things I love about college football is it helps us appreciate places that we otherwise wouldn't. We often think about New York and Los Angeles and other major cities. But why not think about Eugene, Oregon every now and again, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Fayetteville, Arkansas, any of these spots that otherwise we don't think about. And they are just as important to the good old US of A as the major cities that do dominate our bandwidth. And so I think that has something to do with it, that you're in spots that don't have a whole lot else to compete with when it comes to recreation and that sense of community. And the other thing too, and it's sort of piggybacking off of this, and hopefully this isn't too long of a story, but it was Mother's Day recently.
Yeah.
And for my mom, who is a humongous football fan, I got her an LSU door hanger. And it's in large part because I got her a Saints door hanger. And so she, subtly mentioned, honey, I would love an LSU door hanger. It would look great right next to the Saints. And I go, all right, you're very good at dropping hints, Mom. Thank you. So
Yeah.
it's what I did for Mother's Day. And it got me thinking as we were talking about this, that Mom and I love watching football games together whenever we do get to hang out, but we enjoy it for very different reasons. As a data scientist, I enjoy football in a very different way than my mom does, who loves the pageantry and the bands and the vibes, all of that stuff. I tend to look at it more, mathematically, I suppose. And then I have close friends of mine who may have played college football or high school football at a very high level, who enjoy the game in that capacity. And I think college football has this ability that other sports may not be able to when it comes to attracting people who can enjoy the sport for very different reasons. And somehow we build community off of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To both of those points, I think there is a regional identity with it, and kind of like what you're saying, probably more so along the lines of like family tradition, but there's many reasons why people get interested in the sport, and then those reasons might change as the years go on. So with Oregon, that was one of the first college teams I ever truly knew because of my family. So it became like deeply embedded within my family. And at first it was just like this fun thing, like I just loved sporting events and I thought it was a good time. But then it became like a way to bond with certain family members, and then like traditions start and inside jokes are made, and like all of these core memories are made that kind of grows and grows into this thing. And so I think with college sports and like college football in particular, it's very layered. Not to say that that can't happen with NFL or professional sports. I've heard many heartwarming stories in that regard as to why this is so important to people. I definitely think it's sports in general. I just think that regional identity that you brought up is particularly interesting because it can put places like Eugene on the map, or universities that we otherwise wouldn't necessarily really think about, like Alabama and Auburn, and like, people who have their Cinderella stories. Like, we're talking about that region naturally more throughout the season and throughout the year because of it. So I think that's like part of what makes it relatively unique, is like that regional component. And then obviously like that school pride and belonging. So it's like somebody goes to college and let's say they have like an amazing time, like they meet all their favorite people, they grow exponentially, they have like just like a great time, great experience. I think those emotions become closely tied to a school, and therefore that love kind of continues and that loyalty continues in that trajectory.
Absolutely. And I think when we're talking about the political dynamics of college football, I think it's one of the big concerns that I think we should take seriously. And I know this is something that sort of Bill Connolly wrote in his latest book about, how does college football thrive in this new environment that we live in, when money is being introduced and conferences are bloated and all of that. Pertaining to the latter, I think that's an important thing that we should be talking about in this offseason, because on the one hand, yes, it's fun as someone who now lives in Big Ten country. It's fun to see the Midwest battle the West Coast and see if there's a certain brand of football that trumps the other. Like, that's interesting to me. But at the same time, are we losing our sense of regionalism in all of this? Because I remember when I was covering Alabama, one of the fun things was having people in the deep South having to pay attention to the Pac-12 and the Big Ten because only 2 teams or 4 teams can make the championship, college football playoff, whatever. And so you're trying to figure out who looks better than whom and how the rankings play out and things like that. And I don't know if that's something that really happens in a lot of other sports. Like if you are a San Diego Padres fan, then you are a Padres fan, and you may not necessarily be paying attention to what happens in the American League Central, but in college football, you absolutely are paying attention to what other conferences are doing and what the best teams are doing there in case they take your spot in this small playoff. And so that is something where you're paying attention. And then there's a cultural element too. No, football is better in the South. No, football is actually better on the West Coast. And that adds a certain rivalry layer to it that I hope that we still appreciate, even though conferences are expanding and different teams in different regions are playing each other more often, and teams that are in neighborhoods, like the intra state rivalries seem to be falling by the wayside. And that's also a concern for me as well, because you still need to have those bragging rights over your friends and family. And if they're not there, then that is something that we have lost. And it is very much an RIP experience. Like we should shed a tear for those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, it's kind of really hard to analyze the current landscape of college football because I think the ways that we fell in love with it, it looked obviously vastly different than it does today. Like now we have West Coast teams traveling every season, one of us traveling every season to Rutgers and Penn State, and it's like regions that we otherwise would not have ever truly thought about that much. But that was like a huge thing with like conferences expanding, was obviously kind of started with like Oklahoma and Texas going to the US to the SEC. But I remember when Oregon was entering the Big Ten, kind of like a new wealth of information, right? Like, okay, so now we have like all of these other teams that like I followed to a certain degree because I love college football, but now like I need to know more. And there's just so much that comes from that because you hear all of these different fan stories, you hear all about their different traditions and the things that they do, the things that they frown upon, their own rivalries, like all these types of things that has been so fascinating to learn about in the last couple of years that I think that's just like part of the way it does look different because now like Oregon versus Oregon State's not as much of a conversation or a discussion as it once was. And same with like Washington and Washington State. And now we're like looking at like Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, like these in-state rivalries where that was at one point such a discussion and such a debate or something that was just like an automatic conversation starter at Thanksgiving is not necessarily existing anymore. So I do agree with you about kind of like shedding a tear for those moments, even though conference expansion has its benefits. It definitely has like moments where it's just like, oh, that kind of sucks. But you brought up an interesting point with rivalries. So why do you think rivalries matter so much in college football? And any like think of like the big rivalries. So we're thinking like Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC is obviously we're on the fence about that one still in regard to them playing. But like these big rivalries, what do you think like your opinion is like, what is your opinion on how those stand apart from like other sports?
I think the first thing that anyone outside of the college football ecosystem needs to understand is go back to last season when Ohio State, 2 seasons ago, I guess, when Ohio State won the national championship, lost to Michigan that year, but then wound up winning the whole thing. There's still Ohio State fans who have just a tinge of disappointment talking about that year because they lost to Michigan. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand college football. Rivalries matter just as much, if not more so, than winning conference national championships, making a playoff, any of those achievements. And the reason for that is, I think, partially timing. You have these rivalries happening around Thanksgiving, and so you don't have the demands of everything else in terms of work and school and whatever that sort of get in the way of appreciating these particular contests. And so I think that's part of it. Also, too, is history. You've been taught your entire life to dislike, if not hate, the other side. And chances are you've seen the other side enjoy some modicum of success, and that burns you to the core. And it should, because I think for anyone to enjoy sports, you also have to dislike something just as much. It's sort of the polarization of sports where, yeah, you got to find something to love, but you also have to find something you hate as well. It helps you stay balanced, if nothing else. And college football, maybe isn't the best in terms of achieving balance, but it is good when it comes to making sure that you have to articulate exactly who you are for and who you are against. And I remember Greg McElroy talking about the Alabama-Auburn rivalry, and he put it really, really well when he said, you have to pick a side. And if you don't pick a side, then both sides will hate you for not picking a side. And that's the way it should be. And I don't know if other sports have been able to achieve that kind of bimodal result where you must love something with every fiber of your being and then hate something else just as passionate.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, it is all about balance. And I feel like there are so many memories and stories that are built from these rivalries. And that can be said, obviously, across all sports. But when we think about rivalries, like to this day, probably at least 1 to 2 times a year, this comes up for me personally. So I can only imagine what it's like for other people. But it's like, oh, where were you when the kick six happened? And it's like, I can tell you vividly where I was and like where I was in that moment and like the thoughts running through my brain. And I didn't have a dog in the fight. I'm not SEC as it is. And so it's kind of like, God, that was such a pivotal sports moment for that season, obviously. But then like it's just one that is just like deeply embedded in our brains. And we have so many, like at least me personally, like I have so many stories from just like that one sports moment where I wasn't at the game. My team wasn't playing, but I can tell you because of just like how important that moment was and like the rivalry in general, so many stories and memories have been generated from it. So I can only like take my experience and imagine what it's like for an Alabama fan or imagine what it's like for an Auburn fan. And like, again, all those memories and stories that have been generated from that particular moment. And it's the same with rivalries, like you were saying, like Ohio State and Michigan fans probably have a wealth of stories and memories from their rivalry. And it's also interesting to me with like college football, how it becomes like a measurement of how your program is doing. So like I know like there's like always these conversations in the off season of like, let's rank the top 10 rivalries in college football. And then those who don't make the list, it immediately becomes a conversation of like, what aren't we doing enough to have our rivalry be nationally recognized? And it becomes a measurement of like marketing, a measurement of football success, a measurement of decision making, social media interactions, like all of these things. And it's very layered. And I think that might be unique in comparison to like interests of other people, perhaps even sports, but like outside of the sports world, like how layered it can become just on the topic of rivalries alone. I think that's like particularly unique to the sport in general.
And yes, other sports are this way as well. But if you are power ranking rivalries, I
Yeah,
feel like those numbers don't change all that much.
they
They
don't.
might change when it comes to, say, conference realignment. So if Bedlam, Oklahoma State, now that they're in different conferences, if that waters down the rivalry, well, then that's a political decision. That's a bureaucratic decision. That has nothing to do with how good those programs are or anything of the sort. Someone from the outside made that decision. But if we're power ranking rivalries, then Ohio State, Michigan's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. That's still going to be must-see TV. Alabama, Auburn's not going away anytime soon. Army, Navy certainly isn't.
Exactly.
Even if you move the dates of the games, they are still just as impactful as they've ever been. And that, to me, is just really, really cool that these things are historic, if nothing else. And it's not like the rankings that we see in the AP poll or the college football playoff every single week. Those change substantially every day, every week, every month, whatever. But rivalries, because they stand the test of time, because they are so historic, we know fairly well which ones we should be paying attention to.
Yeah. Maybe like college football fans in general just like love power ranking things. Maybe we
Yeah.
just like we spend a lot of time making lists and ranking things. Maybe that's unique in comparison to other sports because we obviously need the off-season content to debate over and bookmark and everything that we do. It definitely seems like a different animal in that regard. But you're right. They stand the test of time. So conference realignment can bring perhaps a change in rankings, but it's always like these rivalries that are on the outside and are not often listed. I feel like there's this constant conversation about like how do we improve our rivalry, and it's like just such a fascinating, unique conversation, especially from a communication standpoint of like what, like I don't know many people who can understand the intention behind such statements or such conversations, but again, it's like the peak off-season content, which is it's really fascinating.
You
And I
mentioned
also, yeah, go ahead.
if I
Go ahead.
may, we're
Yeah.
talking about rankings here. I mean, when the transfer portal became a thing in college football, what was one of the first things that we did? Power ranked transfer portal classes. So
Yeah.
who gets the best seniors to come in and be the second string right guard? Suddenly, now we have to put a number to that, and it's exactly what you're talking about. That because of the small sample size and the short season, and how much we crave college football, even in May, we've got to rank something. We got to do something, and those are our answers, no matter how asinine they might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you see an interesting side of it being a data scientist, like all the numbers that goes into it when it's really somebody bored on a Thursday evening trying to engagement farm or trying to get any sort of attention for their rankings. It's like, no, it generates so much engagement and conversation that it is fascinating. And it kind of leads like this entire conversation. It poses the question of like, why do certain programs feel larger than life? And do you think that's because of like what we were just talking about a few minutes with like the regional identity, the family identity, traditions, stories, rituals, and all of that? Do you think that contributes to certain programs feeling larger than life or just feeling so big for certain individuals?
I think for sports to be successful and a program to be successful, you need to have some sort of mythology surrounding you. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be true, like the story of Rudy for Notre Dame, for example. There's certainly some bits to it that aren't entirely accurate, or the Yankees and the Cubs and baseball. Like there are things about the lore that has attracted fans forever that aren't entirely true. Did Babe Ruth really call his shot? Well, we've seen the video. We can parse it down as much as we want. But I think when it comes to certain programs and how they've developed that lore, part of it is just marketing. Are the uniforms cool looking? Does the band play really good music? Is the stadium really big? Are there a lot of people who have just been born into that fanaticism? And if that's the case, then certainly you're dealing with easier platforms than others. But I think as long as you have something, I mean, what was it? When I was at a USC game last season, they're talking about the phenomenal stretch one with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and Lendale White. And, it's the mid 2000s. Like we know that dynasty. And it's always fascinating to me that more than 20 years later, we still talk about it like it was yesterday. And I know there is an element of college football where we are reliving the good old days, maybe more so than other sports. At the same time, I find it a little obnoxious just because I like to live in the present day. I wasn't there for it. So I remember watching it and thinking, wow, they're really good. But, I don't necessarily have the attachment like, say, others do. But I'm just one person, and I'm around a ton of USC fans who want to believe that this can happen again. It is just a matter of time. Just get the right quarterback in. Make sure Lincoln Riley can put together a fantastic defense finally, and then maybe a dynasty can occur. And so I think to answer your question about what does it take to have a phenomenal program, I think certainly some stretch of success certainly helps with that. Some phenomenal marketing that does need to stand the test of time for quite a while. And whatever works culturally within that community also has to make sense. I think, it's been interesting. Like whenever I, have paid close attention to the LSU coaching change, for example,
Yeah.
it was always, okay, does Brian Kelly really fit within the culture of Baton Rouge? And my answer was always, well, all you guys care about is winning. The big bar that all the players hit before going onto the field just says win on it. It's not the Notre Dame sign. It's not any of that.
Right.
And so if he's not winning, then okay, he's not fitting the culture. Fine. But when he was winning, was he fitting the culture then? Yeah, probably not. But you didn't care that much because, winning was what mattered to them. But it's not that way with every program. I think sometimes being aligned with who are the representatives and do they fit with, what they're trying to do. Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech's a good example. Yeah, he had some fantastic stretches. He wasn't winning every single year, but there was something about how he fit Virginia Tech. You think about that program and it's him. And that's hard to do. And sometimes it's hard to articulate why or why not that happens. But that to me is how a program takes off, is sort of this alignment culturally that's sometimes hard to articulate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I want to take a side note for a minute, like a sidebar, because I want to hear you grew up obviously in the LSU territory. What are your thoughts on Lane Kiffin being the new head coach at LSU?
Oh man, it's getting warm in here. Jeez, I don't know. To turn my AC on in just a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, you know.
You know, I will be fascinated. I think where I get really annoyed is all of the complaints about Brian Kelly. The massive payout and not fitting the culture, all of that stuff. You bring in someone I don't know is any better than that. Like the buyout is much, much bigger. He will be much tougher to get rid of if things fall apart. I don't know if Lane Kiffin just screams Cajun like Ed Orgeron did when he was there. Like he fit LSU, and he fit LSU even before Joe Burrow, did what he did and they won that 2019 championship. Like it felt right that he was, wearing that purple shirt and all of that. I don't know if Lane Kiffin really does all of that. Now, if he wins, then fine. All bets are off and, everyone's happy and that's all they really care about. It feels more like a bureaucratic decision than it does something where we want to present the best of Louisiana. Instead, it's we want to win as many football games as possible, and we're willing to spend a ton of money to do so.
Yeah.
And I think to a man, LSU fans understand that, but they're also willing to do it because you look at the landscape of college football right now, Texas, Georgia, those are the best programs in the conference. And you may have to outspend them to do so. And that's going to be very challenging for them. Even a program with a lot of money like LSU, it's still going to be a challenge with Georgia that's already established itself as a national power. Texas might do that as soon as this upcoming season. And then after that, you still have the remnants of Alabama. That matters. And then you may have other programs that may come in and bite you just because, they, put things together because they're capable of doing so. I I don't know why this I guess the one thing that I have a problem with is, oh, this is a cultural fit. Like this makes so much sense in the world. No, say what it is. It is just a way to win more games. This has nothing to do with anything else. And I think if you water it down, then the perspective is a lot clearer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really well articulated because it obviously is going to be one of the major storylines in the upcoming season. I mean, it pretty much dominated the end of last season, well into playoffs, and then obviously it has so far this off season. So it's one of those storylines that college football absolutely needs throughout its season to kind of keep going and to keep conversation going and discourse and discussions and debates and everything of that. But I think you bring up a really interesting point is like, what type of hire was this? And like you said, they care about winning and had to pay the big bucks to go get the big name. But like, how much was culture really considered in the decision making going into hiring Lane Kiffin? But it'll be interesting. Like, it's definitely, I mean, I'm not an LSU fan, obviously, but I mean, I don't hate them, but it's just, it's not my team. But it's definitely one of those storylines that kind of just dominates the media and dominates the discussion, and the one that you'll naturally kind of just follow as a college football fan going into the season. So it's fascinating. But that's a good segue actually to kind of starting to think about like how media plays a role in the generation of stories for college football and around college football. So we talked a few minutes ago about like old college football and new college football and kind of how that looks different and what we lost along the way. But how do you think, like, how has social media changed college football fandom and the conversations in general?
It's changed it a lot. If for no other reason, I think it's forced us to understand just how much we love and hate, uh, things about the sport. In some instances, I think it's been very good when it comes to introducing new fields that otherwise we didn't. I think if you're dealing with, and I hate using this term, so forgive me, but this idea of mainstream media telling us how we should enjoy college football. Like if we're, watching College Game Day in the mornings, or the stuff that Fox puts together. Certainly productionally sound, I guess. But still, though, like it's not a data heavy approach to college football. I don't think that it gets into, say, the strategy all that much in terms of why we do what we do, or making us smarter about the plays that get called and understanding the sport that much more. I think it can be very surface level, but what's great about social media is that it's forced us to do deeper dives, and we are smarter now than we have ever been as far as that's concerned. So I think that's been a fantastic bonus, that suddenly there are media pockets that help us understand the game better, if that's what you want. If, say, on the business side, if you're dealing with NILs, for example, then maybe watching your favorite sports cable network won't get into it too deeply unless it's a super massive story like the quarterback for your team bouncing to another one because of a bigger paycheck. Then, yeah, that gets attention. But if we're trying to figure out how to build a team and why you aren't going after this position, even though everyone's graduating or the transfer portal makes this bit of sense, then there are now pockets where you can get that information and talk about it much more readily than you could before. And that, to me, is really exciting. So all of that, that's fantastic. On the other hand, like I mentioned before, we get more emotional on social media. We can bash people on social media far more readily than we could before. It is the ultimate level playing field where if someone is a foot taller than me and can bench press 500 pounds more than me, at least I can still call them a you-know-what on social media, whereas I can't really do that in person for fear of retaliation and fear that I will not be able to give my mom a Mother's Day present
Yeah,
the following year. Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, so it's great, it's bad, it just changes the sport and how we digest it in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some way, like fans and those who obviously follow teams, conferences, or the sport in general, like gave them the opportunity to engage more. So it's like now you can interact with someone who wrote an article about your favorite team online, and you can get a ton of information. It's like we have so much accessibility to different information. If you want an entire podcast episode on like North Dakota State's quarterback history, I'm sure you could find it and you would be able to learn about that. And so we have such a wealth of information and resources available to us to learn about and talk about all the different things we want to in regard to the sport. But you do bring up like, it emotionally charges people as well. So it's like a lot of people become keyboard warriors, right? So it's like they can say what they want because they have an anonymous account and no one's really going to be able to track them down to retaliate in some way. And that can be both wildly entertaining, but obviously I think it can definitely the discussion loses credibility, obviously. So it's fascinating. Like the new media age has created this space for people to engage, which is great. We can talk to other fans of our team and of our conference and of the sport in general. It's absolutely, it can be super fun, especially during the season. But that those emotional reactions, it's kind of like a bunch of us become kindergartners again, where we are just like, we have such a lack of impulse control, and we're just like saying what we're gonna say, and we don't care if it makes sense or we don't care if it's a stretch, as long as it fits our narrative and that we have like that, we feel like we're getting back at them. It like feels good, and that's what we want. And so it's kind of like the animalistic elements of being a sports fan are absolutely highlighted on social media.
We need our inside voices back.
Right?
That's what
Yeah.
this conversation
Yeah,
is.
we need our inside voices, a calm corner,
Yeah, all of it. Yeah,
all the stuff.
you're in timeout. You sit in
Yeah,
the corner for 5 minutes. Chair facing
right.
the corner. We need to reinstitute that as a college football society. And it's funny as you were talking, I was thinking about how we can also use social media neutrally. And talk to other fan bases far more easily, even as something as simple as, hey, with the transfer portal, we just acquired this wide receiver. Tell me about him. What is he like? What's the work ethic? What are the routes that he likes to run? Those kinds of things. How much did he develop since he started with you guys? I think that is also a fantastic opportunity to promote communication and promote civil discourse, if there is such a thing in college football. But it is this weird thing where, we need content in the offseason, and certainly players switching teams can provide that, and forcing us to talk to other fan bases to learn more about these new guys is also an opportunity that, had the transfer portal been around 30 years ago, we wouldn't have had that opportunity.
It's so true. And even like you said, like neutral communication, but obviously like just productive communication. Like I'm going to travel to Columbus for the Ohio State game in November. Like where's a good place to stay? Where should I eat? What should I do? Like all those types of things. I love it when I get tagged in like those tweets. They're like, I'm coming to Eugene. What should I eat? What should I check out? And I'm like, oh, this is super fun. I think I was a tour guide in my last life. I don't really know, but let me tell you everything you need to know about the city or about the town. So I love those like general neutral conversations, because it's like, oh, this is like the basis of it is truly exciting. You get to travel to like this brand new city to watch your team play, and then you get to interact with fans about like what makes their college town so fun or so easy or super interesting or exciting, and all those types of things. So yeah, that general and that neutral conversation that can take place over social media is definitely like a new element of the college football society, but it can be productive. It doesn't always have to be so hostile.
Restaurants change so much too. Hotels change ownership all the time. Like, you get a book, and yeah, it can at least get you started with your travel log, but you do need to have boots on the ground to know exactly, if some new place opens up, and especially in college towns, like new places pop up all the time. Uh, you know, how many times do we have friends who graduated from a certain place, who may be our tour guides or what have you, go, oh, I remember when that was such and such, and that's where we would hang out on Friday nights, and now that's not there anymore. Now it's a Taco Bell cantina or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, that's we
Right.
lost something there. But if you have boots on the ground, you can keep up with what the latest things are, and maybe you want to be with the students, maybe you want to avoid them like the plague.
Totally.
You can only do that with conversations with total strangers.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it can totally be productive. It can totally be neutral. And that's like a fun component of like social media being such a part of the college football sphere nowadays. Absolutely. Um, so like another way that we see like so many stories generated in the college football world is with things like preseason rankings and week one overreactions. Obviously, like coaches on the hot seat or coaching transitions, which we kind of just talked about with Lane Kiffin. But we like have, I feel like when it comes to college football, there's like a set amount of like storylines and headlines that will take us through the season, and it kind of just depends on which team is being affected that year. So this year, obviously a big storyline like we talked about will be LSU and Lane Kiffin, as well as like, god, we had such a coaching carousel last season. We have a lot of brand new head coaches. So we have to take a look at like Kyle Whittingham at Michigan. Obviously, Lane Kiffin, we have James Franklin at Virginia Tech. And so there was just so many transitions that I think that is like really going to live up to the hype this season in comparison to others where we have so much to look out for and so much to keep our eyes on. And like why so like and to kind of get to my point with the preseason rankings, week 1 overreactions, coaches being on the hot seat, coaching transitions. Why do you think it is with college football that fans rush to conclusions or kind of rush to debate or rush to like a defensive standpoint in a particular discussion?
I think part of it is, again, because college football is such a short season compared with other sports, we want to believe that what we see is what we are getting, when in reality, it's not true at all. You go back to last season after week 1, I remember Kirk Herbstreit saying LSU was the best team in the country. Just a few weeks later, they fired their head coach. And so
Yeah.
that wasn't exactly accurate in that context. Even Garrett Nussmeier, their quarterback, was plummeting on all kinds of draft boards and, didn't get a high pick, for this draft. And so there were all kinds of issues that maybe, even the best among us could not quite look at and figure out. At the same time, I think, the sample size being really small, we have to make immediate conclusions. And so that's a part of it. But then also, I do think that why do we have such, why do we have these quick draw conclusions? I think it's in part because we have had to wait so long during the offseason and get no new information about really anything except practice. And I think everybody goes into a new season in any sport feeling optimistic that their chances are going to be fantastic or awful or what have you. And there was a time when you lost a game in college football and your season was over, especially if you were one of the greats, because finishing in the top 2 or top 4 felt nearly impossible. And so you lose a game, you may not be able to come back from that. And other than, say, Ohio State, when Zeke Elliott was there, we really don't have examples of teams losing that first game and then going on to absolute greatness. Usually it's a sign of bad things to come. And I think that's kind of been ingrained in us. We don't have those examples. We don't have those moments where, okay, well, you can still come back from this and still be okay. Even if, say, an offense is sputtering, for example, in a win, we know that at some point that's going to fall apart. We just expect those things. And so because there's not that time to develop for the most part, and yes, players certainly get better, teams get better and worse over the course of a season. Injuries can happen, luck can happen, that's great. But we need something to hang on to, and we will hang on to that one thing for dear life because of the connection and fanaticism that we already have.
Yeah, you bring up actually multiple really good points in that. So it is a short season. So I think we are kind of we're already at a higher level in comparison to other sports because we only have a few short months. And we have a few short months to overreact, but we have a few short months for things to fluctuate at the speed that they do and for things to happen. And I do think we have something ingrained in us for how college football used to be. Like you said, you couldn't lose one game. That could totally end your season. And so I don't think we necessarily have outgrown the trauma that maybe that caused, where
Yeah.
we're like, oh my gosh, we have to overreact to us not maybe having as dominant of a performance as we wanted to. Because does that mean that we are, sputtering and we're on like the decline and eventually we're going to lose? And it kind of just like sets off this like panic mode with college football fans of like, they need to play at a certain level every single game, every single week to make it in the playoffs, obviously, but to deem it a successful season. And so it's fascinating. I don't think we've necessarily have, evolved past that point of being a college football fan where that one game could totally crash out a season. But now we have like expanded playoffs. Another storyline is the expanded playoffs potentially going to the 24 team playoff. What are your thoughts on that real quick?
Please stop. Stop what you're doing. Don't kill the golden goose here. I was against it going to 12. I
Yeah.
thought 8 or 4 or 6 was just fine. But instead, we had to expand it, I suppose. And there have been some good things. Like I think having on-campus games, that's really what college football should be all about. In fact, if I would not necessarily be opposed to a championship being played at the better ranked team. And that's how we decide who the winner is. Like that would be fun to me, but it won't happen because there's too much money having it in neutral sites, and I understand that. And those games are still put on very, very well. Don't get me wrong, but having on-site playoff games, that's been a wonderful addition to all of this. I do worry though that yes, the regular season, it's still going to be popular. We're still going to be watching games if it goes to 24 teams. Like that's still going to happen. And I'm not worried about that. But what I don't like is if we really want to decide who a true national champion is, and this has been one of the big problems with college football throughout its existence, is not being able to correctly identify who the best team is, in large part because we can't even agree on who the best team is. We get to these,
Right.
12 team rankings this year, and we're talking about who will be good or who will be a better matchup for the 5 seed or whatever, when that's not what it's about. It's about what you have done, what your resume is. And
Right.
so the fact that we have all these disagreements, that's problematic, but it also goes to show that this is a sport that's done a terrible job of determining who the actual best team happens to be. And a playoff is necessary for that. But if you make it too big, then it may simply be which team was the hottest at the end of the season,
Yeah.
not who had the full body of work to prove that they have been consistently excellent from September all the way through January. And so the criteria by expanding the playoff suddenly changes, the descriptors suddenly change. And I wish that our dialogue and our narrative would be sophisticated enough for us to understand what those changes become by expanding the playoff.
Absolutely. Again, very well said. I think expanding it to 24 is just utterly ridiculous. 12, it should absolutely cap out at 12. I was definitely on team like 6 or 8. I'm fine with the 12. I can live with it. It also just feels like we haven't had enough time to enjoy the 12 before talking about expanding it to
Mm-hmm.
24. So if you could just give us some time to like really work out the kinks, make sure this works, and hopefully change minds to not expand to 24, like that would be great. I just think it's like it's too much. And I don't know, I mean, I could be alone in this, but the last 2 years, the playoffs have been great. I mean, not necessarily for my team, but in general, they have been great. But they also kind of seem long. Like by the time from start to finish, when playoffs begin and when the national championship is, like that is lengthy. And kind of just working through that process seems necessary and efficient and before even considering expanding it to 24.
It was something last year where Indiana was clearly the best team. And I think after they blew out Alabama in the Rose Bowl, at least I felt like this is painfully obvious who the best team is going to be. Yes, we should play the games, but this may not get exciting. This may just be lopsided all the way to the end. And you are going to have years where that happens, fine. But it did feel like we had, say, one too many rounds just to get to the final game to be absolutely sure that Fernando Mendoza and company just happen to be better than everyone else. Why have that extra blowout game when it just felt completely unnecessary by that
I could
point?
have lived without it. I could have lived
Yeah.
without it personally. Like I didn't need to do that again. So
Yeah, I'd rather watch other bowl games with other teams. Now, if I'm watching a lot of third stringers, then maybe not. But yeah, if you can largely keep rosters intact for bowl games, then yeah, there are probably some 7-5, 8-4 teams that I would rather watch than say another playoff round where I know with 95% certainty what's going to happen. Instead, let me watch someone enjoy their last college football game, or watch some sort of up and coming superstar who I need to be paying attention to next year. Get me excited for the following season. Don't just give me another round of something where I'm going to start tuning out after 1.5 quarters.
yeah, Absolutely, absolutely. But again, the storylines that we get from playoffs
Hmm.
obviously generate that discussion and are necessary, especially going into the off season. It's like something we kind of hold on to for a little bit longer. Um, and then just like all the usual stuff too, like the coaching carousel and transfers and commits and everything like that of such. But going back to fans overreacting, yeah, I do agree. I think it's just ingrained in us to panic and debate because there was a time when that's basically what college football was. Now we have an expanded playoff, so it looks a little different, but I love seeing it. I mean, playoff ranking or sorry, preseason rankings, I think they're utterly ridiculous, but again, I think they're entertaining at that as well. But one of my favorite things about college football, and this is truly like the kindergartner in me, like how we just had that reference of like the kindergartner lacking impulse control. One of my favorite things about it is like those debates that take place the first month of college football, where like a team was ranked number one, but by week four, they're like playing at a number 10 level and like they dropped substantially in the rankings, and then like we have these up and coming teams that are like going up in the rankings, but who have they played? They haven't really played anybody, so why are we ranking them? And it's like that back and forth I absolutely love. I think it is like something, it is like symbolic to college football. So I know that like preseason rankings absolutely irk some people, but I absolutely love the conversation and discussion that it generates.
I am pro preseason rankings. In fact, I don't think we have enough preseason rankings.
Everyone should do it.
I think we need preseason rankings of the preseason rankings
Yeah, yeah.
because not only do they create more conversation and buzz and excitement for the upcoming season, but if you really are going to rank teams properly, and I think this is the dirty little secret, you need to have some kind of a foundation. You need a baseline for how you're putting all of this together. Because if
Right.
after, let's say it's 3 weeks, well, there's some great research out there that suggests that really it takes 5 games to really know what you have and really conclude anything. And also the College Football Playoff Committee doesn't release their first rankings until what, end of October, start of
Right.
November. So
Right.
and that's the way it should be, honestly, because everything else up until then is just conversation. They don't have any major impact on or sway on what we're actually doing. They're just marketing tools, and that's fine as long as you see it for what it is. Then I think it's a good thing to promote additional conversation, and I'm again for it because how in the world do you rank these teams 1 through 130 something without having some kind of a baseline for the talent that you have, history of the program and its success, how much money they have in the NIL coffers, who the head coach is? All of those factors have to go into it because if it doesn't, then you're going to have some really wild, wonky results that are going to look even worse. You look at preseason rankings and how well they perform in terms of being predictive, they're not bad. It's way worse to take 1 or 2 weeks of the regular season and then put together your rankings because they're swaying you too much. What a team does in the first 2 weeks really doesn't matter all that much compared with what they do the rest of the time. So, yeah, even when you don't have any sample size to go off of, I think it's way better to have some kind of a baseline to operate from comparatively rather than taking a super small sample size and then completely changing your perspective of the entire landscape based upon that.
Yeah, absolutely. Big fan of the conversation that it generates, and I love watching people who like hate preseason rankings. I love them
We're always
stating
old
their
people
case.
too.
Yeah.
Just old fogies who just want to go in and
Yeah.
ruin everyone's day and spray the hose on the kids in the yard, so they'll run off. Like, give me a break. Have some
Yeah.
fun. Touch some
And that's
grass.
what, yeah, let me start talking trash earlier. And that's what preseason rankings do. It allows people to start the trash talking. So let's start it. We've waited far too long for this. So it's necessary. All right, so I have one more question for you, Ed.
You got it.
And we are recording this on May 18th. So by the time it drops, it's going to be a few weeks later. But at this point, what is one college football narrative or storyline that you're already tired of?
Arch Manning at Texas. That one.
That's fair. That was very quick too. I believe
Yes.
100%.
Because, again, They may do very well this year. They might win the conference, and that is fantastic. But the Big Ten has been such a buzzsaw in terms of, Ohio State's going to be really, really scary. I think Oregon's going to be really good. I think Michigan could very well fly under the radar because I think Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches in college football. And now he's at a program with money and resources. Wow,
Right.
that is a frightening combination. I think the conference is just such a buzzsaw right now that I wonder if we're in this era where it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for someone else to get in there without just having a lot of hype surrounding it. And while I think Arch Manning can be a fantastic quarterback, at the same time, Heisman preseason odds, for example, aren't all that predictive. Usually it is someone who either comes out of nowhere or is maybe the third or fourth shortest, odds player who comes in and wins this award. And so I get the buzz. I understand it. Perhaps it's even deserved. But I know I'm going to be hearing it a lot between now and early September. And I am already sick and tired of it because I think my focus should be going elsewhere in terms of finding who the true national title contenders are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they say everything's bigger in Texas, and I agree with that in terms of the hype around Arch Manning. Like you said, I think they could have a great year. I think we could see an improved Arch Manning at that, and more experience under his belt. But yeah, it's obviously one of the major storylines, as it was last year, but one of the major storylines going into this next season.
Yes, it is. Meanwhile, you've got maybe other programs in the state of Texas that
This is true.
might also be very good this upcoming season, and maybe we need to be paying more attention to them. I'm just saying, sorry, not sorry,
Yeah,
as far as
absolutely.
that's concerned.
Yeah, like
Uh,
this, absolutely.
Yeah, and look, I get Texas is going to get our attention. Like that's fine. I mean, I've grown to accept that, but it just feels just a little bit more absurd, over the past couple of off seasons. And so here we are dealing with it again. Fine. Let's roll with it.
Let's roll with it. Well, Ed, thank you so much for being on the first episode of Saturday Huddle. I'm super glad that you and I could connect again. It was so much fun last season when we connected for an episode of Big Ten Talk. This has been super great. Thank you so much for just taking some time to talk with me about college football and the storylines around it. I really appreciate it. Can you tell people where they can find you?
Absolutely. So on the socials, I'm at Ed with Sports on Twitter and Instagram and Threads and all sorts of great stuff. So you can find me there. You can also find me on YouTube with the Injury Territory Show with Will Carroll, and that's we've got several episodes dropping every single week. And so definitely subscribe to that channel, give us a 5-star review, all that good stuff. So we appreciate that. Also, you can check out my work at Pine Sports where I write our a betting blog, every 3 times a week. So that certainly keeps me busy. And there are always other random projects. Also, my Substack, Ed with Sports. Make sure that you check that out as well. So Substack, Injury Territory, Pine Sports. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but it's all there.
Yeah, you're doing it all. My goodness, that is a full plate. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ed. I appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
Thanks for spending part of your day with me here on Saturday Huddle. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with a fellow college football fan. Until next time, enjoy the games, appreciate the stories, and I'll see you back here for another edition of Saturday Huddle.